Hello, a very warm welcome to all of you to Friends of Europe's Europe-China Dialogue. We have 2 days, today and tomorrow, where today we'll be talking about from recovery to green transformation, and tomorrow from tech wars to tech peace. Today we are focusing quite specifically on what Europe and China needs to do to both collaborate, work respectively, mutually, in surviving, but also managing and recovering, but most importantly, transforming to a green recovery. Before I say anything further, I want to explain to you that we have simultaneous translation for you. There should be a slide coming up. There you go. If you need the translation function, you can see from the arrow what you need to press in order to access the simultaneous translation. Also, just a word of engagement. Those of you who are savvy on Zoom will know that you need to have your image on, your name on, and to be on mute. Until I call you, you can unmute yourselves. If you wish to raise a question, a query, please don't hesitate to use your virtual hand. For those of you who are unaware where that is, if you go onto your screen and look to the bottom left, you'll see a participants icon. Click on that and you'll see a virtual hand. Use that to raise your indication that you want to speak and ask a question or even raise a frustration. I also want to encourage all of you on Zoom, on Zoom, to use the Zoom chat function. We find this extremely useful. We only have a short time, so in the occasion that I'm not able to reach all of you, please do not hesitate to put your question on the Zoom chat. And from our experience, our speakers always diligently respond. We also use the Zoom chat function for you to engage with each other, and also to share resources and ideas, because this is not a classic speaker participant response type of conference. At Friends of Europe, we do it slightly differently in that we make sure there's maximum interaction, and the brain is everywhere on Zoom and also on live stream. So it's about interaction and engagement with all of you and not just our speakers, because you have also good ideas and thoughts and ways of thinking that help us recover from the situation we find ourselves in. I also want to welcome our live stream audience. You are also included in this discussion, and if you wish to raise a question or a query, use #EUChina on Twitter, and I will endeavor to take as many of you as I can. So for a few words of introduction for this particular dialogue, which is usually an annual summit of 3 days, which we've shrunk into 2, and obviously it's gone into on the online world. We have a range of speakers for you from the private sector, academia, governments, etc., international institutions, to discuss this very real issue of a green transformation. People talk about it regularly. There are reams of paper and commentary that's been attributed to it. How do we get there, especially when you have 2 blocs, EU and China, both significant markets, both contributing to emissions, both subject to geopolitical relations, and the whole range of global tensions surrounding each, both in terms of being a value setter or a rule maker, or being the largest economy, and having much more resources available to it than many others in the world. And I refer to China in that respect. We have a long-standing history of good relations between EU and China, which have been, I suppose, strained is probably a delicate way of saying it, in the past COVID year that we've been experiencing. And so it becomes even more important and essential that we keep a dialogue open, which is constructive, mutually respectful, and based on a set of shared values that we can actually work on together. So I want to turn to our first speaker, Hannah. Hannah, a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Hannah. Hannah, you've been in this game for a long, long time. You understand what the politics and the issues are in terms of EU-China, China-EU relations. From your perspective, can you share with us, just for, just to keep it simple, why it's essential that we get this collaboration to work right in the context of a green transformation, and what you think are going to be some of the sticking points? We've read about it, obviously, but there's always something beneath the surface of media commentary that we need to understand better. So over to you, Hannah, to share with us your thoughts on why it's critical and what you think some of the sticking points are.
Well, thanks very much. And as you mentioned, I have been working in this area for a long time. I currently run an international development consultancy in China, and previously worked with EU delegations, for EU delegations on climate change issues. And obviously, China has been very critical to those negotiations in the past and continues to be. Now, with regards to why this is so important, I think there's 4 reasons, and I'll go through them very, very briefly. First of all, as you mentioned already, EU and China are 2 of the largest regions emitting greenhouse gas, and therefore their action is going to be very, very important to the rest of the world. Second, they've already both now got carbon neutrality commitments, which brings them together and shows that there is an opportunity here that both countries and regions are ready to take advantage of. China by 2060 and the EU by 2050. And I'm sure as they work towards that, those targets will become even more realistic and hopefully be brought forward even closer. The third reason is both regions are also, both Europe and China, are leaders in terms of green technology, whether it's distributing green technology or developing that green technology. Electric vehicles, for example, will be a huge market in China. Renewables.
We're losing you slightly.
And,
the connection's very poor, Hannah.
Oh, my apologies. Okay. I'll try to keep going.
Yeah, you're unfortunately your sound. No, sorry, Hannah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes.
You're very kind of, you sound like, you know, a machine. Not due to yourself, but just the technology. We're just going to see if we can sort this out. Yeah, no, I don't think it's working. If you turn your video off, let's see if we try with your video off that we get better sound. Okay, let's try that again now. No.
Yeah, so both Europe and China. No, it's still going.
This is rather unfortunate. Sorry, Hannah. We're not able to really hear you. It's not comprehensible. So what I suggest you would do is if you could just note some of those points down for us, that would be really helpful. I'm so sorry. It's a real disappointment that we're not able to hear you. You were just engaging us so effectively. I just hope that we can bring you back. But if you could just note some of those points down on the Zoom chat, that would be really helpful. I'll turn to our second contributor, who has been, again, someone like yourself, very heavily steeped in EU-China matters on a number of fronts. Yao, a very warm welcome to you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Hi. Hello. Good morning and very warm. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We were just listening to Hannah talking about what the issues are that we need to, you know, why it's important, but also what the sticking points are. But if we kind of flip over to the fact that both, if you like, regions, continents, are planning huge stimulus packages in terms of recovery and a green transition. And from your point of view, what should each be doing to harmonize, if possible, as we move forward, especially in the context of what is going on in the US and the fact that we have seen that US-China relations have taken a downturn quite significantly. You have the emerging and consistent this year trade tensions and trade wars, as some have described them. From your perspective, we have these huge stimulus packages. We know these are, you know, Europe and China, huge economies, essential for global trade as well. From your perspective, what do we need to do to ensure there's a, let's say, a climate smart recovery taking place that's based on some form of mutuality or cooperation? Yao, over to you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you for your question. And I think for the China and EU now we are facing the big challenges. The COVID-19 has brought unprecedented disturbance to the world and also causing more than so many deaths and also countless job losses. And just as you mentioned, EU, China are the big economics. So as we are busy with a pandemic recovery, but we have to remember there's an even bigger threat confronting with us. That is how to address climate change. China and EU are both amongst the world's largest greenhouse gas emitters, and both countries have increased the climate ambitions in their recovery plan. So, in EU, the EU is during the green recovery, and also China's President Xi has also announced that we will make the notable 2060 carbon neutrality pledge. So for the EU has rolled out the biggest green stimulus bill was almost $600 billion. So in their ambitions. Climate ambitions in their recovery plan. So to scale up the capital for the national and the international green and sustainable recovery, I think I will answer your question from the perspective of green finance. I think because to do a green transition, green recovery, China and the EU should increase their cooperation in green finance. China and EU are both pioneers in greening the financial system during these years. While in the early stage of cooperation, green finance is increasingly highlighted as promising avenue of China-EU cooperation, as directly mentioned in the 2019 China-EU Summit joint statement. And the EU and China will reinforce their cooperation on green finance to harness private capital flows towards a more environmentally sustainable recovery. So I think how to have this kind of cooperation. I think they have maybe have three key pillars. First, to expand engagement in each other's green finance markets, with the ultimate goal of increasing companies and financial institutions investing and raising capital in each other's financial system. These efforts is taken forward through learning lessons from each other and clarifying and harmonizing differences and incentives in organizations to pioneer efforts such as issue green bonds in the counterparts market. As the EU is finalizing in sustainable finance taxonomy and green bond catalog, and China is revising its green bond standards based on its recently launched green industry catalog. 2020, I think, is a crucial opportunity to harmonize the forthcoming updated green bond standards with starting point in green bonds. So this harmonization can scale up to cover the entire concept of sustainable finance, which in turn can have spillover effects on the rest of the world. Second, I think joint efforts are needed in third countries, as both parties are increasingly active in the international financial system. As key frameworks of such collaboration is BRI on the Chinese side and connecting EU and Asia strategy on the EU side. An ideal method is to start the cooperation can be co-financing between the European Investment Bank and EIB and China Development Bank. in order to catalyze the private and the commercial parts of both the EU and China's financial systems. So this effort can build upon current bottom-up initiatives such as the BRI Green Investment Principles, which are a set of guidelines on ensuring environmental sustainability, whose founding members consist of primary EU and Chinese financial institutions. Third, I think the EU and China can coordinate their response to COVID-19 in terms of greening stimulus package, as both countries are using the financial system as a critical tool of supporting economies, as opposed to pure fiscal spending. These stimulus packages are a key opportunity to green financial system as a whole, as well as to learn from each other, while coordination of stimulus packages following the 2008 global financial crisis are carried out between G20 countries. So this has so far only happened to a minimal extent to this time. If the EU and China more systematically coordinates their responses, this is likely to incentivize other G20 members to participate. And existing efforts, this can be built upon, includes the central bank, the central bank and supervisor network for greening the financial system, NGFS. As a platform on which countries throughout the world coordinate how to govern financial system to become greener. So it could function as a avenue to coordinate greening stimulus measures, including quantitative easing and green macro assessment of commercial banks, or reducing risk weight of green assets. So they have some, China and the EU and some more, and other central banks already have done something on that. So I think we can share experience and also lessons to each other. And finally, I would feedback a little bit about your question about the U.S. side. Because I think no matter which president is elected in U.S., and the U.S. will have a sensitive partner. So China and the EU will be more, as a third party. I think China, EU, and the US can have a kind of a cooperation, especially China and the EU, in this a little bit complicated situation. So and also, BRI countries, investing in BRI countries, and I think they can also have potential cooperations. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really clear, very specific ideas of what could happen, what can happen, and so also what has happened that you can build on. I love the way you called it a little bit complicated, the relationship. What an understatement, but nice way of saying it. But actually, we know what some of the issues are. From your experience and what you're reading, all that you set out sounds like a very good menu of things that people could, both EU and China, can and should be collaborating on. Do you see the green shoots of that happening now? And so just give us kind of a reality check on what you're suggesting from your position. People will say you're a university. Actually, is it really, are you denying the politics and geopolitics? So is this possible? Secondly, we as a think tank have long said that actually EU should be looking east rather than west as its default position, given the demographics, the economics and markets. And there's an opportunity, as you set out, for collaboration. And is Africa, both Europe and China have an interest in Africa. Is that a space, is that a continent in which this kind of relationship could be built, which uses green finance as an opportunity to be a bit of a game changer in relations internationally? Difficult question, I know, but is there a potential there? Over to you, Yao.
Yeah, I think China and the EU already have a cooperations of green finance during these years, especially from after 2016. You know, China and the EU are two leading countries or districts to promote green finance to make the economy more green. So they have the corporations, including first of all the standard, the harmonizing the green definition. EIB, especially EIB and the China's Green Finance Committee, have already cooperating on for 2 years to do the white paper on how to harmonize in the green definition. And also, China's new green bond catalog is a draft, but already adopt some the international definition. And also EU's sustainable taxonomy also learned that China's actually green goals, including not only addressing climate change but also environmental protection and the eco diversity, just like this. So I think this is how we learn each other from the standard side. And secondly, there are more and more China's financial institutions or enterprises, they issue green bonds in EU's market. And also they are some, I know they have some EU's institutions thinking to issue green panda bonds in China's market. And with the openness of China's financial market, I think there are more and more this innovation will happen. So, and just to invest in other countries, just like BRI and African countries, I think they have more corporations when they invest in one big projects. I think we can learn, we can working together, especially some not only enterprises but also financial institutions. Actually, I know they already have some big projects. China, not only China's commercial banks, but also EU's commercial banks, they were investing one big project. So I think this kind of corporations will continue. And and to if the I think for them,
we've lost you. This is what happens when you're running, something which is global, and Wi-Fi is hostage to fortune.
Green,
No, sorry, we've lost you. I do apologize. We lost your last points, but don't worry. I need to move, keep on moving forward. It's one of the, the kind of risks of running something global and online. We always have, we're at the mercy of effective Wi-Fi and bandwidth. I'm going to thank you very much. One of the things I'd like you to think about, though, and others, and let me say to all our Zoom participants, please do use your virtual hand, engage in this conversation. You've heard a little bit from Hannah, and Hannah's put on the chat what the 4 issues are from her perspective. You've heard from Yao about what she thinks are the potentials, but also the actualities in moving this forward. And perhaps it's about the third country investment agenda that actually could harmonize and provide better EU-China relations as they collaborate on green finance and other matters. On that point, one of the key questions that I have in my mind is that when the globe is bust in terms of its public bank, we know that China outweighs the rest of the world in terms of its bank balance is much better than the rest of the world. And there's a lopsidedness potentially in terms of how the financial markets can be played in that regard. But on that point, I want to move to Jonathan. Jonathan, a very warm welcome to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Good to have you with us. Jonathan, I'm going to pose you a very difficult question. And that is, because everyone's been talking about how disastrous the situation is. We all know that in the EU, we're still hostage to a absence of consensus on the largest recovery package it's ever put together from Hungary and Poland. And we know that that deal is fundamentally based on the financial and capital markets playing their role effectively and creating new EON resources through tax, etc. So again, there are a number of risks here. But in the broader sense, if you were to zoom out, and everyone's been talking about high unemployment and the impact of that, we're not going to be out of this for at least 2 years. And we know that scenario planning is not helping us at all because we've never been in a situation before. But I'd like you to, engage in the art of the possible. From your perspective, what does a successful post-COVID economy look like? So what does it look like given where we are now? What does a successful economy look like? And from your perspective, what are the convergences and divergences between EU and China in that regard? So deep breath, because it's a really huge question to you. Because I think we'll all be really very interested in your thoughts. Over to you, Jonathan.
All right. Well, thank you. And no, it's a good question, a good starting point. I always believe that you should start by thinking through where you want to go, because if you have no direction, then anywhere is fine. But so this idea of vision is very important. I think that to coin a phrase, or to actually to steal a phrase, lean, clean, and green. That's the motto of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and it's not a bad way of summing up what we have to achieve. By lean part is a little bit of a play on not only, of course, we're not talking about austerity, but mostly about productivity, about the capacity of the economy to create new opportunities that are higher value added for everybody. So this is basically saying we're going to continue to be able to do more, and do more with more, we hope, but if we have to, do more with less, is one aspect. Clean is interesting because clean is all about transparency. Clean is about creating that responsive, flexible, customer-centric economy that it will, I think, over time lead us to that productivity. But will also fundamentally address the needs. And I think it's very important to recognize that all of these economies, they are economies in transition, and they have done a better or worse job, depending on where you are, at meeting the needs of their citizens for shelter, for income, for education, and that has to be part of the vision as well. And finally, green. Because of course green is the externality we're dealing with here, and we need to incorporate green in that sense into every one of our economic decisions. By definition, in a sense, it is incorporated. If you're not paying attention to it in some way, you are paying attention to it. You're kind of accepting things the way they are. And so, yes, we need to actually understand the consequences in terms of the environmental implications of our economic decisions, recognize those, and then be purposeful about it. So that's at a very high level. If I turn then very specifically to the green aspect, well, I mean, it isn't there isn't two ways to have a green economy in that sense. You need a decarbonized value chain. So that at some level is where we're going. We are going to a net zero economy, and that the only way you get there is by not producing more carbon. So that is, of course, just a fact. And we know that is a commonality, if you wish, between Europe and China and anywhere else in the world, because it's simply math. What is different, of course, is how one might get there in terms of the characteristics of that decarbonized value chain and how one chooses to do so. And I think there are definitely differences. I mean, there are differences in terms of, for example, the scale of cities. China is the home of the 5 to 10 million person city. I think that there are relatively few of those in Europe. So the scale of the city, to some extent, density, that isn't as much a difference. There is some. The age of cities in terms of the age of the infrastructure and the buildings, those are different. Importantly, the power sources. There are, in both continents, we have legacy power sources in the form of high fossil and carbon, in a carbon-intensive coal. There are different attitudes in both continents towards some of the newer power sources, notably nuclear. In both continents, you might also find differences around siting and how one chooses to site large quantities of renewables or ability to do so. And then finally, there are, of course, differences in terms of the financial systems themselves. and the capacity, as you mentioned, about taxation in Europe versus potentially different approaches and for carbon markets that could be developed in China. Simply the role of the financial system, and particularly the state aspects of the financial system, differs. So how one gets there is no doubt going to be different between the EU and China. But the common goal exists, and there are plenty of areas where there's collaborative opportunities, as was being said. Notably in technologies that are going to develop, because without collaboration, one cannot achieve scale. Now, both are continental-sized economies, but simply put, it will be much more effective if they were collaborating to scale the marketplaces, and in so doing, capture those economies of scale, drive down the learning curve, reduce the costs, and create more innovation, and allow for more competition as well, which again increases productivity. So, I mean, there are definitely returns and opportunities for collaboration between the EU and China in most aspects of this decarbonization process. I hope that takes a first step at answering that question.
It does indeed. Then now go to the more difficult one, even more difficult one, is where do you see, I mean, you're over there in China, you've seen and you're watching the kind of the world drama play itself out in terms of politics and tensions of digital sovereignty of all sorts. It's become a kind of a new narrative around, unfortunately, who'd have thought, seeded by not least the US in its current administration. From your perspective, do you see the actual examples of things moving forward? There is the public narrative, political narrative, but from where you're sitting in the work you do, are there things that you can point to and say, actually, here are the things that are taking us in that direction?
Well, I mean, if the question is related to the green future and sort of
Indeed.
specifically related to that, then, well, I mean, I think clearly, of course, we've had the announcement by Xi Jinping of carbon neutrality by 2060, and the associated plan that's been developed at Tsinghua related to that. So there is some momentum here, and I think that from the way this is working, you'll see more in the 14th five-year plan, which will be released in March, and then at a high level, and then there'll be follow-on sort of more detailed plans. So it'll actually be quite transparent as to whether something actually is happening or not. Mm-hmm. And we will need to see decarbonization across the board, which implies electrification in industry. So we'll probably see a step up of that for steel. We will need to see some movement on CCS and carbon capture. We will definitely need to see decarbonization in terms of the renewable energies coming into the grid, and we'll need to see more investments in the grid, notably for both intra-regional and inter-regional optimization. So there's a lot of investment in the grid. All of which is to say, I mean, that this is an economy-wide challenge. It won't happen, all at once magically overnight. It's definitely a decade-long challenge. But it's important to get started now, because a 1.5 degree pathway essentially ties one to a carbon budget, and that implies that the earlier we start, the more budget we have, and so early movement is definitely expected. But from a global perspective, I think that one should also start to be aware of the fact that, of course, China, as being one of these huge players in the system, maybe the biggest player, will start to have a global impact. And that's where I think it'll be more visible to people outside of China, is the effect that China's having on its neighbors, the effect that China's having on global technology, on global finance. And so in many ways, I would say that the challenge for both China and the world is to recognize that when you have this tremendous growth, which you could argue is an externality to the global economy, it is going to rearrange the furniture. And so we need to rearrange the furniture in a positive way for all concerned. If we start shoving people out of the way, that's going to be very disruptive. So the challenge is, so in technology, China has largely, and still is largely, a technology taker and a technology importer. It will increasingly be a technology maker and a technology exporter. So how is that going to work? And what are the terms under which Chinese technology will be made available, particularly to developing countries? That's a real question. And obviously associated issues are related to intellectual property and data sovereignty. All of that has to be resolved, but it's the transition that China is on its path to do. So we should get to work on defining those norms. Similarly, China has been largely a capital importer in the past, and now it's going to be a capital exporter.
Exactly.
So under what terms are those is the capital going to go abroad, and how is that going to be received, and then how transparent is it going to be? I mean, all those things need to be worked out. A lot of the issues related to concerns around debt trap diplomacy, so-called, is simply about intransparency. So people really don't know. And I think that's something that actually could be much improved, both from a Chinese and a global perspective. And then finally, there's this issue of rules, because largely speaking, China has been a rule taker. China has been invited to join into the WTO, into the Bretton Woods institutions, and of course it has done so to some extent. And there are clearly areas where it could do differently, has done differently, or not as much related to expectations of others. But the reality is also China is becoming a rule maker. By establishing its own institutional arrangements, whether it's through institutions, supporting institutions such as AIIB or the development of the NDB or other international cooperations. And that, again, is only appropriate for a country which is going to be 15 to 20% of the global economy. If it's not actually contributing to the global economy's institutional arrangements, you would kind of wonder what's going on here. So, in that case, so it's all this from taker to maker transition around technology, around capital, around rules, that's really going to be a hallmark of the next 10 years. And how the global economy and the global polity engages with China will make a big difference to the success or failure of our ability to decarbonize the world, let alone to achieve the other meaningful objectives of, for example, of the SDGs.
Absolutely, Jonathan, that's really, really very effective. And fundamentally, market access, making money, and being able to increase the margin, if you like, will always win the day in one way or the other, regardless of political ambitions. But we do know that, as you say, China's bank balance is much better than the rest of the world. And we know that it's, as you say, it has gone shopping quite significantly, if I can call it that, all over the world. And it has the capacity to do so. What are the kind of, you've set out what the implications are, what the main points are, but do you see the fact that this capital surplus issue and the fact that, China has access to greater resources is likely to subvert or affect the agenda of collaboration? Which is, I know, a difficult question. It's also a political question.
Well, exactly. I mean, of course, I'm not a political analyst, nor is the firm, so couldn't go there as much. But I mean, I think that
Sure.
the idea that the Chinese economy has rebounded and will rebound. It's 2% maybe this year, give or take. 6 or 7 next year is what other consensus forecasts. We don't provide a forecast, but that seems to be where we're headed. Does essentially provide a question. So what is China going to do with all that? And while we do note that the Belt and Road Initiative is a certain quantity of money, most estimates would have it something in the neighborhood of $10 to $20 billion a year of projects that are going outside of China. That sounds like a lot of money. In the world of infrastructure, not so much. It's a relatively small number compared to what the global need for infrastructure is. I think our numbers have something in the neighborhood of close to $1 trillion gap between what needs to be spent and what is being spent globally. And of course, relative to China's own spending domestically, I mean, it's a relatively small number. So there could be more. And I think we're almost scratching the surface of what China could be doing in the years to come. I'm not particularly sure that capital per se, though, is the answer. As I said, I think a large portion of what China could contribute and should contribute is related to technologies. Technologies particularly that reflect the scale of the Chinese marketplace and as a result the low cost associated with it. And with that, hopefully the good value that's associated with buying that product. Now, how it's delivered and whether it's delivered safely, effectively, in line with local context, I mean, that's a whole other set of delivery challenges. And I'd be the first to say that China could do better in a lot of areas. Chinese companies could do better in a lot of areas. But that's where I would look for both the opportunity and the impact to collaborate and to create, essentially an accelerated development path for less developed countries at this point, and for good urban solutions for developed markets. I mean, I think that's where the opportunity of collaboration is from the perspective of someone outside of China.
Great. Jonathan, thank you. Thank you for responding so effectively to my set of very difficult questions. And please, obviously, stay online. We'll bring you back, and I'm sure there'll be other questions. And again, I encourage all of you participants, please do raise your virtual hand. I know that we've got some regulars, but also some new faces that are joining us. So I'm going to, if I see any hands up, I will come and pick you. People like John Farrell from Oxford. We have Max from Taylor University and others, a range of other people there I can see on screen. Be prepared. I will come and pick you if you don't raise your hand, because we want to engage in this debate and not just have just our speakers contribute. I want to turn to Jianyu. Jianyu, thank you for joining us, and a very warm welcome to you. Hello.
I'm here.
Hi. Good. We can hear you. Great. Fantastic. That's a plus, particularly on my experience on this one, for this particular event. Jenny, you've been listening to what our contributors are saying. From your perspective, you're Vice President, China Chief Representative of the Environmental Defense Fund. Do you see things differently in terms of what's taking place, in terms of the collaboration on a green recovery? Can we see collaboration in, reducing methane emissions and other such matters between EU and China? So from your vantage point, give us your take on the issue of how we get, or is there a better possibility of a green transformation in the context of EU-China collaboration and relations? Jianyu.
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I've been listening to the previous speakers, and I fully agree with what their description. But I think what is missing, in my point of view, is we need something to jumpstart. There's lots of talking. We need to not just talk, but to walk the walk. And I think there is something really on the horizon that both sides has been paying lots of attention to. That could be something really important and critical to sort of jumpstart the process, which I identify as the carbon market. I think that we're talking about green finance, low carbon finance, capital investment, technology. But one thing is really important, I think, for us in this business. You need to have a price on carbon. I think without a price on carbon, we'll lose the campus in terms of the direction, and you lose the enabler, giving people the confidence to really go down that direction, no matter what the political statement it is. And but we're very happy. There have been lots of collaboration between EU and China. Helping China develop the carbon market, and I'm pretty confident that once China's carbon market is launched, it will also help, to push and to enforce the EU market itself. I think probably lots of the people on this call are the pros, so I won't go into the details of the carbon market, but just to say that. China has been going through this long process of preparation of launch the carbon market. I think we have seen really positive signs of the market to be officially launched by the end of the year. Depends on what's the definition of the sort of the launch itself. And also through this process, because we have been with this process for the past 10 years in China, helping build the carbon market, you have really seen lots of the side benefit. For example, if it was not because of the carbon market, you won't have the more than 7,500 enterprises. Everyone has been audited for their carbon emission during the last 5 years. I think that's a plus. That is actually quite amazing. That process was not even stopped during the institutional reform, the transfer of the carbon management from the previous NDRC, the Planning Commission, to the current ME, the Ministry of Ecology and Environment. Also, we have been seeing some really positive signs from the most recent 5 joint ministerial document on carbon finance, declaring for the first time that the carbon market is not only going to sort of impact or slash benefit the regulated entities, but also individuals and investors can come in and participate. It's also for the first time that they will allow futures trading, which we know is hugely important to improve the liquidity of the carbon market so as to really help build a stabilized carbon pricing signal. Well, certainly it took the EU a long way to get where it is during the September 14th, the high-level dialogue between the leaders. Chancellor Merkel said that took EU 15 years to get it right. So the not be too high for China to get it right immediately, but I think that's exactly where the two systems can really help with each other to help each other. And I want to sort of get one additional point. If you think about this sort of carbon neutrality pathway China has come under, there are really several elements that I think need to be conquered to the obstacles, the challenges. And certainly one of them is, no matter how optimistic we are, China is still in this industrialization process. If you look at the steel production of China this year, even during the COVID, surprise, surprise, the steel production actually increased this year. And not to mention about the petrochemicals. So really how to help China to leapfrog and to go over this industrialization process as quick as possible, with all the enabling factors. I really feel that a long-term, stabilized, clear signal on the carbon pricing is really essential, for the investors to make the low carbon decisions as early as possible and also as hard as possible. Really have to go over this. I won't go into the other aspect, but just say improve the governance system in China is also important. To further use the sort of co-control, both in terms of air quality management and carbon management is also important. And Europe certainly can share lots of experience on that front. And last but not least is really on the BRI, because one of these effect that we need to start to contemplate is the leakage issue, right? Because once China's go down this way, what's the impact of this one, the potential leakage? And I think China has started this, green BRI process, which Europe and China can also work together. I took it, that was the last point from Hannes earlier, not so being converted conversation because of the internet connection. I think both China and EU can join hands together to help other countries through the green BRI process. So I'll stop here, but just to say, a short but really I think critical element that needs to be there to jumpstart the whole process will be the pricing on carbon, and carbon market is going to be really important, and that's really an area that EU and China have been working a lot, but they can certainly further strengthen it.
Jianyu, that's been really, really insightful and effective, and it brings in a whole new dimension and a focus that we haven't touched yet. But from your perspective, on the one hand, you're quite right that it's in carbon pricing and that there's an opportunity, and also the EU, if it all goes well and there's a decision next week which we're not sure about, they'll be creating a carbon adjustment, carbon border adjustment tax and a range of other facilities for Europe. And we know that carbon pricing has been a hot potato for many, and there's a lot of experience to be shared. But China has created its, if you call it in its own backyard, the economic, corridor, recovery corridor and pact with Asian countries. You also know that there's a huge investment in places like Africa by both Europe and China. Are you seeing, from your perspective, the actual examples of private entities in Europe and China working on this agenda together? Because often it's about markets operating in collaboration. But when we think about carbon markets, do you see any signs of this happening already?
Yeah, well, one thing I think I can point to is this carbon forum that actually is a private endeavor by some of the European entrepreneurs. here, I believe that actually they're going to have their next release on December the 8th. What it is, they will go out and survey the industrial players and get a sort of sense and signaling in terms of direction of the carbon pricing. And then they will publish their report, I believe, on a biannual or annual basis. And again, I think that once you have the right pricing, when you have the confirmed direction, once you have the confidence built, I'm sure the capital will flow in, because when people see, this is probably going to be one of the most obvious, determined, clear pathway where the economy is going. And if you're the capital, why not, join it, as early as possible to really harvest the potential gain, not to mention about, the ESG and also social aspect, reputation, and so on and so forth. Actually, I think another example, really good example I can reference to is most recently Sinopec held a really, I would say, a groundbreaking meeting that is start to explore a carbon neutrality pathway of the company itself. I think that was very much encouraged by their counterparts in Europe, BP, for example, all the efforts that was being put into place. I think the market is very active. The capital definitely is there, but people are just waiting for a signal. I think September the 22nd, President Xi's speech is certainly really a groundbreaking, really positive news into this. And if you actually read the news carefully, President Xi has been saying that 5 times in exactly 2 months. And each time was more strengthened, a stronger sort of voice of the China's commitment to that. And I think that's really a positive signal, to the market. I think what's missing, or at least I have not really seen, is we need to see more of those actions, not just happen in 2 respective regions, Europe and also China itself, but we need to see more joint hands of them together, working in a certain area, Southeast Asia, Africa, other places. Because only by joining hands that can not only help we achieve the goal in its totality as a sort of community altogether, but also I think that's a really good place to show solidarities and a good signal to pave the road, for other areas of collaboration.
Jianyu, thank you. Thank you for again, very wise, insightful words in terms of what the practical action that's required. But and the most important point, which is not the only important point, but it's about the political signals that people are waiting for. And there's a kind of sense of a dance taking place. And obviously what people have been also waiting for, if the change in the US administration will lead to a very different tone and posturing about what we do about EU-China. Do you see now a different element taking place now that we have a Biden presidency that will be inaugurated in January? Because we have 2 significant things happening in EU-China. You've got the joint investment approach being agreed in the spring of next year, in some part of the spring, but also the EU-China summit. Do you see the recent change in political color in the US have any impact on this situation?
Well, certainly, I think Biden has his own climate pledges with regard to 2035. With regard to buildings, the alternative fuel vehicles, and also complete revamp of the coal-fired power plant, in the system. I think what we really need to see, given the urgency of the issue of the climate, because that's the whole point, right? That's why we're all dashing to get some kind of solution. We need to really change the global dynamics from competing to be the worst to competing, for the best, to be the greenest. And I think only by sort of having people join hands together. I mean, particularly the 3 main players all together can really change that whole, sort of reverse the course completely, which unfortunately we have been seeing, during the last 4 years. And I think the U.S. election certainly, plays a role there. But I don't think we can fully bet on just by changing the political leadership, but we really need to see more actions. And I think what you just mentioned about the potential sort of border adjustment tax is also certainly a way to try to get lure people in with or without their willingness. And similar things happen to aviation or the maritime, all those kinds of things. So I think we should give EU the credit, really trying to take the lead in many of those. But now we're waiting for the whole world to respond to that lead that EU has taken. China certainly has responded very positively. 7 after the EU-China leadership, so September 22nd, President Xi made the announcement. And I think now we're waiting for a more concrete and confirmed action from the U.S. so that the entire dynamics can be changed, can be reversed.
Jianyu, thank you very much. Very effective again, all of you. Before I bring Ludovine, because I want to move to the kind of the role of the World Trade Organization, but also what the dynamics are in trade. But if I can crave your indulgence, Ludovine, I'll bring you in a moment or two. But I want to bring some of our audience members in. So, John, I saw you smiling. Riley, and we jousted last time we were together, China Roundtable. John, I want to bring you in, even though you're reticent. John Farron from Oxford University. What are your thoughts? Share with us your wisdom on what we're listening to right now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Indeed, we can.
Yeah, good. I first of all, I'm fascinated to hear from every speaker what they see as the opportunities for what has just been called the EU and China joining hands on addressing the challenges of greening the economy. And there's no doubt that there is a lot of potential for cooperation, both in terms of capital, mobilization of capital, use of capital markets to make a change in this area, and technology. The question I'm asking myself is more to do with the politics. It's to do with, in a world where, to some extent, you can choose your partner, what do partners need as a general background to move from theoretical cooperation to actual cooperation? And my view is that, firstly, I think you need to know that you have a basis of common elements in terms of openness of markets, including financial markets, and a sense of an ability to operate across markets. And I think that there's no doubt in my mind that the transatlantic market operates in a way where European operators or American operators don't see getting into the European or American market as a difficulty. That's a key factor in building the sort of confidence you need to cooperate on projects such as greening. And I think we haven't reached that stage in relation to EU-China relations. So firstly, there's a background of shared assumptions about the way markets work that needs to be behind this. And secondly, I think there's also could be a backlog of problem areas which we have failed to address in the short term, such as the long-term discussion about an EU-China investment agreement, for example, where again, both sides have to be sure that they do indeed share assumptions about how to participate in each other's economies. So there are a whole number of issues which simply make it easier for the EU. And I see the EU has just rushed out an 11-point plan for closer cooperation with the United States. That's happened because the EU knows that it shares a certain number of assumptions about how markets work in both areas, which make it possible to dream up a plan very quickly. Whereas after years of investment on these discussions with China, some things are moving, but not as fast as any of us would like. So I think I'd simply underline that we have to address some of the political blocks and get the feeling that things are moving in difficult areas alongside this critical area of greening the economy, before you're going to see the what's just been called the jump start, which I think we all agree is needed. Thank you.
John, thank you. Thank you for obliging. It's very much appreciated. And I think that, you know, I'd be interested in views from both Jonathan and Jianju on what you've just said, but I won't bring you in right now, but you may use the Zoom chat function. I want to bring a couple of others before I go to you, Ludivine. Firstly, I want to go to, I know that Asanga from Sri Lanka, you've made some points. If you want to make that comment directly, I'm happy to bring you in. Otherwise, it's entirely up to yourself. Asanga? Unmute yourself. Hello. You just need to unmute, Asanga. No, you need to unmute. They unmute, bottom left of your screen, just unmute. There you go. No, I can't hear you. Okay, this is not meant to be. Sorry, I have to be harsh because we have to move on. I do apologize. I know that you've put something on the Zoom chat. I was hoping to bring you in, but obviously we are really again at the mercy of the Wi-Fi. Ziad, let's see if I can be more successful. Ziad?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can indeed. Hello.
Thank
Just say
you.
who you are, where you're from. Hello. You've muted, Ziad. Just unmute yourself. Ziad, you need to unmute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, my name is Ziad
Lovely.
Hafi, based in Ghana, Borderless Alliance. And my question, well, I wanted actually I posted it earlier, and I wanted to find out concrete examples about how the Europe-China collaboration on green transformation is going to preempt or prevent the next value chain disruption. Thank you.
Very good questions. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go to Olivia.
Yes, hello, my name is Olivia Gibner from the European Commission, DG Klima. I'm very interested in the discussion.
Brilliant. First, going to say, I was just about to say, is anyone from the Commission there? And there you go. Excellent.
Okay,
Olivia,
I'm going to ask my question too.
Okay, but ask your question first, but people want to know what you have to say about this debate too. But go on, ask your question.
Well, in general, obviously, I think the carbon neutrality announcement is something very positive. We want to know the details, obviously. We're very curious to see what does this mean for concrete pathways for China? What does this mean for other non-CO2 emissions, non-CO2 gases? So we're very curiously looking into that, but the fact that the neutrality announcement was made really opens the window of opportunity further. And I mean, my follow-up would be on John Fresnel's point, kind of moving from the theoretical to the practical and to the concrete. So I would be curious what the speakers or the people in the room think are the kind of most obvious low-hanging fruit cooperation that would be reasonable, taking into consideration the whole dynamic of competition and cooperation at the moment. And my second question would be to Zhang Yu, I think, on the reactions from companies. So we see President Xi taking a very strong stance, repeating the carbon neutrality announcement several times. How are the companies ready to follow up? What is the dynamic with the state-owned enterprises? Do they kind of take that goal on, or how does that dynamic develop? Are they ready with their own think tanks to do their own carbon neutrality strategies? These kind of very concrete consequences, I think that would be of great interest. Thank you.
And before you go, Olivia, if you haven't got the answer to this question, perhaps you could find a way of answering it, because it might be potentially political too. And I know that, you know, civil servants will rarely enter the field of making such political commentary. And that point by Ziad just now was a really important one, is that how can the collaboration between EU-China foster and prevent another kind of breakdown in value chains? Is that, I mean, I know, because that's intimately linked to the a greening agenda. Do you have a view on that?
Well, probably not. I'm coming from DG Klima, so my focus is really
okay.
on how to green the value chain.
Okay,
I think
right.
this whole discussion
So
on
post
autonomy.
it to your, okay, if you can post it to colleagues that you think are relevant on trade, because we don't have them here, that would be really helpful. It'd be very helpful indeed. And I will say to Yao and Zhenju, I'll bring you in a moment to respond to some of those questions from DG Klima, our colleague Olivia. But I want to go to Karim. Karim?
Yes, many thanks. I'm Karim Dahu, and I'm a senior advisor at the OECD for global relations.
Hello, well, welcome. Glad for you to be here. Give us your perspective, or give us your question, but both, perhaps.
Yes, I mean, let me perhaps just say a few words about where we believe that China has made important steps for a green recovery recently, but perhaps as well some areas where there are outstanding challenges, and perhaps I will have one or a couple of questions for the panelists, for the speakers. I mean, first of all, it's clear that there's been progress in recent years. We've worked on China on many environment related issues, from green growth indicators to a lot of other indicators. We're cooperating at the moment on the COP15 of the Biodiversity Conference. What I want to stress is that the announcements by President Xi Jinping about reaching carbon neutrality by 2060 seem to have prompted other countries, including some neighbors of China, including OECD countries, to follow suit and to make important announcements. This has been the case of Korea, of Japan, that has also announced carbon neutrality by 2050. So this is an interesting element. What I would like to highlight as well is that in the 14th five-year plan, environment is at the top of the agenda. And there are other elements, such as the fact that the plan has scrapped the GDP growth objective and announced an employment objective, which to us goes in the right direction, because this might be a sign that the shift towards a growth model which is more driven by quality than by quantity is confirmed. And we've done a lot of work showing that labor intensity is stronger in the energy sector for the renewable energy segment than for the traditional segment. There are other steps that go in the right direction, but perhaps there are also outstanding challenges, and I would like to name a few. One challenge is, of course, and it has been highlighted by Jianyu, is the issue of an economy-wide emission trading system. That is an area where China will have to make progress. Another area is the area of green budgeting. And here I've got a question to some of the panelists. China announced a year or two ago that it was by 2021, if I recollect correctly, to impose a mandatory environmental disclosure. This is very important. This would make China the first country to do that. First of all, I would like to ask whether they have clues about whether the timing is confirmed. And secondly, to which companies this would apply. Only listed companies. This is very important, because then we have another challenge, which is the reform of the SOE sector in China. The private sector is responsible for 2/3 of the GDP, but still large companies are largely SOEs. And over recent years, there's been a shift of financing by the banking sector from financing to the private sector to financing SOEs. Very significant. Between 2013 and 2018, it was 2/3 for the private sector. Now it's 2/3 for SOEs. And of course, there's the challenge of declining returns on equity. The output the capital output ratio has declined in China, and this raises a lot of problem in the context of an aging economy. And so SOEs, the problem is that they are still very powerful in the energy sector, in oil and gas, in the oil and gas industries, and in industries which are carbon intensive, such as shipbuilding, steel, etc. So the reform of the SOE sector is important. So the issue of corporate disclosure of the environmental footprint is excessively important in this regard. And then just a third point and a question
very
on
briefly,
that.
Karim. Yes.
Very briefly, BRI. The issue of greening beyond borders, because it's clear that China is greening quickly, but then we have the issue also of development finance, whether it is green itself. We have both OECD, but also emerging economies that still finance very heavily coal-fired power plants.
Indeed,
and this is another frontier.
Okay, Karim, thank you very much. And thank you for giving us that perspective from OECD. It'll be good to know if OECD are going to be doing some forecasting or analysis that comes out in these very significant moments towards the end of this year and the spring of next year, where you're going to be having these conclusions and hopefully, as Yanju is hoping for, moving from a signal to action in terms of the joint EU investment strategy. But some of the points that you're making, it'll be good to hear if OECD are planning anything in this regard. I want to go to Shouqing. Shouqing? Warm welcome to you. Can you hear me? And I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to give my greetings to my old friends, Dr. Zhang Jianyu, Dr. Wang Yao, and Hannah. Good to see you all here. You know,
what organization do you represent?
I work for the UN in China, UNICEF. I'm a senior advisor on innovative finance.
Great, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much. A pleasure. I mean, in terms of climate change action, mitigation of climate change, Europe obviously has been doing a lot with China over the past decade. And we can see Dr. Zhang Jianyu is representing a foreign entity working in China on climate change. That is, of course, from America, but also global. And the UK embassy, the French embassy, the German embassy, GIZ, and all of these organizations have been doing a lot in China on climate change.
Yes.
So my question here is more related with not what is happening in China, what both Europe, the EU, and China can do in China, but also beyond China. Several speakers mentioned the Belt and Road. Very often we see a lot of concerns from the EU about the Belt and Road. This initiative is quite often viewed as a political initiative. Of course, there is politics involved, and Dr. Fanel mentioned this. Politics is so closely related with economics and business. But I think, in order for the EU and China to do well, to contribute more to development and growth, inclusive growth, sustainable development beyond China's borders, I think Europe and China need to reconcile their differences in the areas of public governance, in the areas of corporate governance as well, and in harmonizing the status, and also working to develop common rules and status for common good. China, of course, is governed by the Communist Party, and the word communism is very often attracts anxiety and fear. But if you look at China, actually, the government has been practicing capitalism, not communism. So I mean, a reconciliation of the different ways of governing a society, different ways of developing the economy is very important for both regions to work together to make a contribution to the global development. So how can we make sure that will happen? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Shuking. It'll be good to know what your views are, actually. I won't call you now, but you've been there and you've very eloquently set out what you think some of the issues are and actually look beyond China, but what's happening in other areas. But from your position, and you're there, is that, again, like I said to other contributors, where do you see the opportunities lie? Because there's something about, if you want to make money and create markets, it doesn't matter what you believe in, because actually, at the end of the day, you just shift in that direction. But that isn't going to play in the current environment that we find ourselves in. And it'll be interesting to hear from you, if you can use a Zoom chat rather than call you back, in what your thoughts are. I'm finally going to go, and I do apologize, Ludovine. You've been so patient with me and us, because I want to bring you at this point, because we've been talking about, and we're alluding to, we're getting to the point where, World Trade Organization, key institution. Many have kind of amongst many multilateral institutions, have suffered the ire of the US, but also has suffered a lot in terms of people calling for its overhaul and reform. But from the way you're sitting at the moment, what you've been listening to, do you see the potential for, and this sounds kind of obvious, the trade agreement process as being a key driver for getting us to a green transition and green recovery, given all that you're hearing and the points that have been made about politics? So, Ludovine, over to you to answer that very difficult question about where are the examples where you see this happening, and do you see this as the kind of the pathway, the driver, the lever for getting us towards a green transformation? Hannah, over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much. And no worries. I think it's good. I'm more of the last speaker, since what I'm bringing, hope to bring, is more of a bigger picture perspective. So that fits well, I believe, in your forum. Just to say that indeed we are living in the WTO in general, but in the WTO right now in a challenging moment. We are into a situation where for a couple of years our members have been discussing reforms of this institution, and whether it's fit for purpose to help members address this so-called 21st century issues. And so in a way, this challenging moment, which has been reinforced today with the current situation with the COVID, etc., is a good moment for this institution to look for new opportunities to indeed address these important environment challenges in particular. And in the past, and I think what we need to continue doing even better in the future, is to make sure that the WTO is a place to discuss ways to ensure that economic models of development do address properly the complex environmental and social challenges ahead. It is a place, and it should continue to be a place to discuss ways to facilitate trade in environmental goods, and to identify, to develop best policies to make sure that trade policies are used as a tool to improve environmental protection. And the WTO rules that we have and the WTO institutions are there to exactly do that, to help members prepare a good regulation that are fit for purpose. Today we see that there is a renewed level of activity on these issues, with several members launching into what we call in our jargon into initiatives. So these are a group of members, like-minded countries, who go and try to discuss on particular topics to try to push a little bit further on some of these topics. And we have seen that on non-environment issues, like for small and medium-sized enterprises, on e-commerce, on investment, etc. But very interesting is that very recently now we have seen a renewed and very strong interest of members, and quite a broad representation of our membership on environment issues. We just recently, 10 days ago, we ran what we now call an Environment Week. And during this Environment Week, which is a week of meetings in the WTO on trade and environment issues, in this context, two groups of members have launched into initiatives on environment issues. The first one I should mention is one which has been launched by China together with 7 other countries, China, Fiji, and some other both developed and developing countries. And they have launched an informal dialogue on plastic pollution and environmentally sustainable plastic trade. And this is a very good signal that they see the WTO as a place where we can further work on such topics and improve first improve more the transparency, the understanding of what is going on this topic, but also try to go a bit further and help make sure that the trade in plastics becomes sustainable. So this should be seen, in my view, as a very positive development on the fact that they see the WTO still as the right platform. And then a second very important initiative as well that was also launched 10 days ago is by a group of 50 WTO members, including the European Union and its membership. And they have launched a structured discussion on trade and environmental sustainability. And the idea there is to go again further on certain topics, first in a plurilateral way among a subset of WTO members. But and these topics include, for instance, things like fossil fuel subsidy reform, climate change, circular economy. This is what is being foreseen as topics that they would like to discuss. But the idea is not to do that independently of the WTO. To the contrary, to really fit this into the existing institution of the WTO. In particular, we have a committee on trade and environment, which has been very active in recent years in discussing this kind of key issues, and which has helped these members, in fact, put together these initiatives now. And they really see their work they do in these plurilateral initiatives as something they want to fit in the work of the WTO, because obviously these issues are global in nature, and they need to have some kind of multilateral implication. I mean, they have multilateral implications. So even though they don't manage to have all the multilateral trading system involved at first on these issues, the idea is to really try to involve as many countries as possible in order to make it as efficient as possible globally. So, I mean, I can, I'm happy to go on, but if you have other questions.
Yeah, sure. You're saying that actually this institution that we all love and care for and thought is important to set up, the WTO, still has purpose. Because it's being used in the way it was designed. And I suppose the issue for many is that as we have a new tone from the US and the challenges that we've seen just over the weekend, the bash between Canada and the US in the context of vaccines, etc., and the banning of imports and exports, etc. We're going to see more of this. We're going to see much more of this in the context of the rush to vaccinate. And I don't think the WTO or the others have come together to create some sort of saying, hey, guys and girls, we need to learn the lessons of the last 8 months and actually put the competition element of trade aside for a moment here for a public global good. Now, I'm not asking you to answer that question, but it's clearly that the WTO has to have a role in this, as does the IMF, as does other, the UN, in terms of bringing together leaders to create some form of a different kind of accommodation to how we respond to what will become the vaccine wars in the next 12 months. Very briefly, any kind of response to that point that I've just made?
Yeah, sure. I mean, without obviously going into the vaccine debate, which goes beyond me and my portfolio, but just to say something which is still relevant to generally how you look at this kind of issues, is that the WTO provides a set of rules that is very useful to look into when any member is putting in place a measure which may be trade restrictive. And we have had quite a number of cases in the past past where countries were putting in place trade measures for an environment objective. And the way the system works is that it did help these countries to put in place good regulations that were not trade instruments that were used for protectionism, for hidden protectionism, but which were really measures that were meant to address an environment issue. And we have, of course, a dispute settlement system, which helps in addressing sort of at the end of the road this kind of issues. But even more importantly, we have a number of institutions of committees which are there to discuss all these different regulatory requirements, and they are very useful in terms of preventing going down the road of an actual open dispute, and they help discussing, being transparent about measures that are being discussed and developed, and this transparency is absolutely key in dispelling misconceptions often.
Okay, thank you, Ludwig. And I mean, obviously, they provide, as Zhang Yu was saying earlier, that signals are important, are absolutely critical, but action is more so. But let's come back to some of you in a moment. Hannah, you wanted to come in, and I wanted to have another go at see whether we can bring you in and hear and see you.
Yes,
let's have a go.
Let's see if it works now.
Hallelujah.
Look, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. It's been fascinating being part of this discussion and hearing a range of different views on, especially on the opportunities, but also on the challenges. And I fully agree that there are still a great deal of challenges. I'm an economist by training, so the politics is not where I'm focused. At the same time, even the economic challenges are very strong. If we're talking about collaboration in other countries, of course, the issue of competition and technology transfer is a huge challenge. But what I think, and just picking up on the discussion that you were just having just now in terms of the World Trade Organization and other multilateral organizations, I think one of the most important frame of mind that we need to have going forward, and for these organizations to be more useful to generating collaboration going forwards, is to almost put themselves and to think of themselves as being the voice for the smallest countries and least powerful countries in the world. And if they do that, as opposed to mediating between the large powers, if they focus on that as their mandate, I think they may be able to come to some really interesting solutions around this. I mean, just to give one example, and I mentioned it in the chat, when you look at what China has done with regards to WTO, China did accede to WTO in 2001. At the same time, it was very careful to use particular rules and apply particular rules. Now, of course, the European Union didn't particularly like that, and many others didn't like that. But through that, China has been able to generate a level of development that and many other activities is a level of development that many African countries certainly aspire to. Are these tools that other countries can use to their advantage to also, but in a collaborative way as well, and the European Union helping to do that in order to develop as well. So these are, I do hope that the multilateral organizations can work with Europe and China to pull together the right kinds of lessons and support this kind of green recovery.
Hannah, thank you so much. I'm so pleased we were able to get you back. But that point is so well made, is that if you focus on the least or the weakest and the most in need, if you like, you might find a pathway to collaborate better. A very well made point. Zhang Yu, you're about to go, I see, but can I bring you in very briefly before you do to respond to some of the points that I made, but in like 60, 90 seconds, if I may.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Just quick points. One is that I think China is very serious on the commitment, to answer the question from DG Klima, that the whole country is mobilized, including the sectors in particular, and also the regions. I can't tell you how many meetings that I've been to most recently, both with the regions and also with the sectors, discussing their early peaking plan and so on and so forth. So I think if you look back to 1992, since Kyoto, China has never failed any single pledge on climate that has made so far. So I think we should have confidence in China's new pledges, particularly of those 5 repeated, keep strengthening commitment that President Xi has been making 2 months since he broke the news. So that's the first thing. Second, I think it's really important for EU to keep doing what it has been doing, recognizing the role that it plays. Yes, sometimes it's important to look back, look at your partners to get more strength of confidence that you're not alone on this pathway, but keep doing what you're doing and keep spearheading on new frontiers, I think are also really important. Here I mentioned the methane, we didn't have time to talk about, but we welcome the EU methane strategy, the exploitation of border adjustment tax, initiative on aviation, old one, and also the new one on maritime. So keep doing what you're doing and set up a good example. And third one, I would say, we need to recognize the urgency of the climate issue and really put our differences aside. Yeah. Because if we think this is the humongous single most important challenges human beings are facing, we all need to work together, and China cannot be spared from this. So let's put our politics aside and welcome US join back to the court as well, but really try to focus on this issue and use this as a new impetus for the new future. Thank you very much, and so nice to meet everyone.
I know you need. Thank you so much, and see you again soon, I hope. Colleagues, I'm run out of time, but I want to crave 2 or 3 minutes.
You've been muted.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
It works.
Since that's a clever way of keeping the moderator to time, you'd have noticed, hey? Just cut him off so that I have to stop. But I won't stop. Just for 2 or 3 minutes, I would just like to go back to a couple of you. We have Wang Yao, who'd like to come in very, very, very briefly, if I may. But I also want to, conclude by going back to Yao, Yao, to say a few words in what you've heard so far, but also to Jonathan in terms of the lean, clean, and green agenda. What does he see? What do you see on the kind of the forecast for the next very significant 6 months ahead of us, when actually we still don't know what's going to happen to the world economy? So Yao, over to you first.
Okay, may I feedback to a question about how China's enterprise integrate the presidency's
absolutely, yes, because I think people want to hear answers to that. Please do, Yao.
Yeah. I think in China, they actually have some process. When President Xi announced the carbon neutrality goal, the first step is China's 45-year plan integrate this carbon goal into the 5-year plan, and then all the local governments, they also integrate this. Now they are working on that. So later, I think will come to the enterprises and also financial institutions. Now they are working on this, how to integrate this carbon neutrality pledge into their plan. So I think that now we are on the planning process, and then later, I think at the end of next year, all the enterprises and also financial institutions, they will show what was their plan on that. Yeah, and I know that now some local governments, they are working on to statistic how to how much money, if they how many investment they should do to when they if they will get these targets. So I think this is a very exciting thing for China, for China's many institutions. So they are working on this. Yeah.
Okay, Yao, thank you very much. And let's see, tomorrow we talk about tech tech war, from tech wars, tech peace. And let's see how that agenda pans itself out in our discussion tomorrow. But Jonathan, again, I seem to kind of want to give you very difficult questions, but you are McKinsey, and you're meant to have a brain. I mean that in the nicest way. Your analysis is always sought out. Tell us, what do you think are the key things that we need to be watching out for in the next 6 months, given where we find ourselves now, and that most of the forecasts and projections and scenarios aren't really worth their weight because we've never been in this situation before. And no one really knows what they're talking about, really, to a certain extent. We can do as much modeling as you want. But on that note, having said all of that, over to you for some final words.
All right, well, no problem. Happy to take a shot. Well, I come back. I wanted to make a few remarks related to the collaboration between EU and China and where the opportunities might be more specifically. That's come up a bit in the chat. And I want to start by noting that there is no shortage of collaboration right now. The EU is a major investor in China. China is a major investor in the EU. When we talk about collaboration, what we mean is a partnership that creates commercial value. So if it's not a partnership, well, it's not a collaboration. But if it doesn't create commercial value, it's also not a collaboration. So it's something else. We can call it something. By that standard, there's no shortage of collaboration here. And I think that the path forward, as you try to develop new markets, which is what sustainability is all about, then has to include that. Now, it's not the majority of investment by any means. Typically, joint ventures are no more than 15 to 20%, for example, of foreign direct investment. But it is an important element for the transmission, the sharing of technology, particularly when two companies come from a different place. When these are, and it's genuinely an opportunity to complement each other. So I think there's clearly a role and an opportunity for collaboration. And in fact, where there's government support for that, then particularly in early stages of a technology's development, that collaboration tends to happen faster. And in the EU, we have actually had a number of government platforms for supportive collaboration with China in the sustainable energy space. And I note the energy cooperation platform. I note the hydrogen strategy, which has just come out. Which refers a lot to international collaboration as an opportunity. And there are others across smart cities and the automotive sector, of course, earlier in the day. So I think if we talk about where to look, you should look, first of all, to recognize there are some areas which are already quite mature in the collaboration, notably around renewable energy and the grid, as well as in the automotive sector with electric vehicles. There are some areas where we're just getting started. And this is where I think the energy and the focus, so to speak, should be put. Things like hydrogen, things like smart cities. In these areas, it's important to have an economic case for the collaboration. Otherwise, again, it's not a collaboration. It's also important to have companies that are able to collaborate, which in the case of EU and China, I think we have. But even more importantly, we need to have infrastructure. If we do not have the infrastructure, we're not going to have a very good technology collaboration. And for that means so 5G investments in Europe are very, very important. If Europe does not have high quality 5G networks, it will not be able to collaborate with China on smart city development. So the single most important thing for Europe to do in order to collaborate with China is to invest in Europe. That would be very helpful. Similarly, in hydrogen, the single most important thing for Europe to do to collaborate with China in hydrogen is to invest in hydrogen in Europe. These things will be needed in order to develop the capability of European companies. And so they can have commercial collaborations. And then finally, there is a category of technologies which are simply not yet done. They don't have a case for them. And it's an interesting question, notably carbon capture and storage. And in those areas, we're definitely going to have to see government support. And so that's an agenda to look for, whether you see that government support, whether you see that infrastructure being developed, and what is the conduct and behavior of the companies that are in those mature areas.
Jonathan, thank you. You rose to the challenge admirably, and I think you set out a really interesting menu for a conversation next spring. I think we should bring you back and others of you to have this conversation, because one of the things that we're doing in partnership with the Mission China, but others, is to not just have a once in a year kind of dialogue, but have a framework dialogue across the year. And I think that the set of issues that you've set out, I think, speak to the agendas that you and Hannah and others and Jianzhu and Yao have put together together. I think for, you know, there's a sense of optimism. I thought this might be kind of, wouldn't be as optimistic in terms of the opportunities that lie ahead for collaboration and for moving from just simply, you know, transforming from recovery to transforming to a green recovery. But it's absolutely the case that there are many opportunities, but as ever, it will be politics that will win the day. And let's hope that, you know, leaders get a grip and see the light. And as Hannah said quite rightly, think about those often. And I think about here from the, when you think about those players who are the smallest, the weakest, also think about the citizens who are going to be left behind in both areas if we don't get this right. Colleagues, thank you all very much. This has been extremely effective, engaging, and I hope that you have found it so. I want to thank all of you for participating, because this wouldn't be worth it if you on Zoom and those on live stream didn't engage with us, become meaningless. So thank you all very much. Remember, tomorrow, same time, same place, 10 o'clock, we have the second day of this conversation, which is about from tech wars to tech peace. The biggest driver in our world economy that's going to either be a force for good or a force for bad is digital. And that's what we want to turn our attention to tomorrow. And I look forward to seeing many of you again. Don't hesitate to continue on the chat function, on the Zoom chat. As you said, we'll be keeping some of that information so we can feed it back, so that also we can report effectively on what the agenda should be and what some of your key ideas and thoughts have been. Thank you very much. Keep safe and mind your distance, and hopefully see you tomorrow. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.